The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and merry part, bright the cheeks and warm the heart, but tread the circle thrice about, to keep unwelcome spirits out. Abide within the law you must, in perfect love and perfect trust. Mind the threefold laws you should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. These 8 words the read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Tonight we're going to be talking about creating a magical path that works for you with my guest, Lisa McSherry, who is the author of A Witch's Guide to Crafting Your Practice. Now, Lisa is a witch, a priestess, and author who has contributed to many magazines, anthologies, and annuals such as Witches and Pagans and the Llewellyn's Almanacs. She leads the Jaguar Moon Coven since 2000 and has been featured on many pagan podcasts, and she's also the founder of Facing North, which is an online community resource. Now, you know what I'm going to say next, but I'll say it again. If you have questions or comments for Lisa and are listening live, please send me a private message in the Para X chat room. And if you're not here and want to join in, come over to paraxradionetwork.com. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Even though it's 1 a.m. for you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, so I've been asked 100 questions from people who just don't know what path they should be on or how to figure it out. So this book, I think, is much needed. Was it written because you've had so many people asking you the same questions, or what was the catalyst?
The catalyst was really, I kind of looked up one day and realized that I've been teaching newcomers to witchcraft for about 20 years. And I've got a foundational course. It kind of covers all the basics. And the original version of this book was actually the entire year of lessoning that I do. And Llewellyn was very excited when they read it, but then they came back to me and they said, you've got to cut it in like half, 1/3. This is way too much information for one book. And I said, okay. Which was kind of nice, actually, because it refocused me. And working with my editor, we kind of just got down to what is the absolute core practices for someone just getting started. And so I just wanted to reach out to people and kind of give them encouragement, because you're not going to do it wrong. And it can be really confusing when you're just starting out to figure out what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, and the things that attracted to you to creating your own spiritual path or practice can evolve over time, and then you could sort of feel confused about why you're doing what you're doing. So I just kind of wanted to give people a handle to kind of go forward with things, and actually quite happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, I mean, for a book that isn't 400 pages, there is so much in there that and it's really difficult. I mean, as a writer, I know this, to cut back and put the most important things, and well, sometimes you think it's important and the editor doesn't. You know how it goes. But it is really difficult to cut it down. But then it makes it opens the door for perhaps a sequel, just in case. Yeah.
It'd be nice.
Okay, so you just mentioned that the book is primarily aimed at newcomers to witchcraft, but there's lots of practitioners that still, haven't been able to find their path or wonder if they're on the right path. That's always a question that they have. So it's really kind of like a guide for anybody, right?
Absolutely. I mean, my background is witchcraft, which I happen to think is wonderful because it's so eclectic and open, and you can build on it. There's, kind of get some basic practices down, and then you just go from there to do what you need to do, what your life can support. We all have very different needs in our lives and time that we have available to do things. So, that's my background, but then, yes, it can absolutely be for anybody who's just interested in not doing a mainstream religion.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really write about Catholicism, for example.
No, I couldn't either. None of the three basic religions are, I kind of know a little bit about everybody, but not enough to make any sense. And sometimes not even to me. Okay, so let me just ask you, this is getting more personal, but was it difficult for you to find your path, and are you still following the same one?
Oh, what I do now is very different from what I did when I first started out. But I've also been doing some version of being a witch since I was a teenager. So, if as anyone can think back to where they were when they were a teenager, or if you are a teenager now, the person you become is very, very, very time. And honestly, even who I was in my 20s, my 30s, and I'm well beyond that now, I'm not that person, like, very much at all.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you do look back, we all turn ourselves into witchcraft for different reasons. Some of it is in the blood, some of it's in the family. Sometimes people just decide that maybe it's the path that they want to take, and try. But it's one of those really kind of interesting scenarios because we all come in from a different aspect and at the same time always end up changing that aspect in the beginning because, as a teenager, all right, my great-grandmother was a witch. Okay, I knew this. But, of course, I didn't know her. But, all right, here I am a teenager. Oh, I've got to do a love spell. And, just really real teenager stuff. And then I kind of let it go for a while. And then I got really gung-ho with it. And then it kind of dwindled away. And then all of a sudden, it was like, okay, I need to learn. I really need to learn. I need to go back to the ancestors. I need to do this. And it took me, later in life to really get serious about this. So, and I don't do love spells anymore. I hate love spells, but that's besides the point. So it's just kind of an interesting road that we travel. To get where we are, but like you said, it's perfectly all right to keep changing your path until, it may never be exactly what you want, but you keep changing and growing with it, and yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And I almost think you have to because it's finding your spirituality, no matter what it is, whatever it looks like, really needs to be or have a core of personal development, of growing, of becoming a better person in the world. And whatever that looks like, and for many of us that also includes therapy and, other non-religious tools, we just want to be better people. And when we're better people, we create better community and a better world. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of that's the goal of every spirituality, really. For all the legitimate ones, I guess. That might be the main defining factor in a cult, that it actually doesn't give you the personal development. But, that was the other thing I really wanted to help people find is the way that they could just be better people. Mm-hmm. And I wanted that as a teenager. I wanted to be a better person. And part of, I think, one of the more important things about developing your own practice is that it's very empowering. Mm-hmm. And that's becoming more and more as the years go by, which is not an age thing. It's really a society thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the world around us changes.
Exactly. And I want people to feel strong and powerful in themselves because I think that they will be better people for that and be critical thinkers and more observant and
Mhm.
interested in what's more of that, not less.
Right. Got to break in 1 second. When about 2 minutes ago, your sound just kind of went down really low. It made like a click or something. Did you change anything, or do you have a headset on?
Have a headset on.
Is
Sounding
the
better?
mic right by your mouth?
It is right by my mouth.
Okay, it could be Skype or something. So, all right. So
I will speak more directly into the microphone.
that'll help. Okay, yeah, because I heard it go, but I just turned up my volume. But I'm not techie, but Sarge has the better ear. So, okay, all right. Um, so, in the introduction to the book, asking the question, why be a witch? And the answer to the question was being a witch is in partaking control of your life and changing your life to manifest desires and healing yourself. And, people have always talked about, whoa, what do witches do? Why are you a witch and whatever? And I think that whole section is really good for people who just can't figure it out.
Exactly. That's why it's there, right there in
Yeah.
the introduction. I mean, I'm a very plain writer. I wish I wrote more eloquently, and I'm not Dickens by any means, or like that. I'm very much a let me ask you a question, then I'm going to give you an answer. Now go find your own answer. And that was because that's the model I teach with, and when I'm actually interacting with my students. So I had to figure out a way to do that in a written form where I couldn't actually talk to everybody directly or one-on-one, or I would never have any time for myself if I actually tried to teach everyone who's reading a book of mine. So I just asked questions.
Yeah, and I mean, some people will be asking, well, why be a witch? Some people just know that they are,
Mm-hmm.
and some people are sure that they want to be, and they're not trying to understand why. They're just not questioning it. But was it difficult to kind of break it down into that very simplistic but covers everything answer?
It wasn't difficult, no. That's just kind of how my brain works, though. Much of the book actually flowed quite naturally and logically, partly because I do talk about it all the time. So once I actually started cutting things, it was more a matter, okay, now how do we refine it and bring it into deepest essence? What's the shortest amount of words I can use to get this point across?
Yeah, well, I mean, you did a really good job. And you did not say things like people, what they think about witches. They think that we take control of them, and all that. So, you're saying that we're taking control of our own life. We're manifesting our own desires. We're healing ourselves. I mean, that sounds maybe selfish, but certainly better than, okay, we're going to, make you dance on some swimming pool ledge and falling in or something. You know what I mean?
Like
So,
something out of a fairy tale. It's like, here's these enchanted shoes that will make you dance. No, because what we can control is ourselves.
mhm. And, I'm not hearing you now. You went double.
Okay?
Okay, now you are. Okay, there you are.
Interesting.
I know. Well, you're in Portugal. We're here.
Yeah.
There's a long way between the two, so we'll just muddle through it when it goes like that.
Okay.
Now, the book is divided into two sections: foundation and practice. And foundation covers topics like what I just said: what is magic, book shadows, creating an altar, introducing deity and ethics of a witch, and ethics is really important. Magic is sometimes hard to define because it seems to me that magic in general, for everybody who practices it, we make our own magic, I think. there's no book for everybody to follow. This is how you do this. I mean, everybody has their own way. But, that's the short version. I mean, it sounds simple enough. But when you talk about your personal experiences over for decades, that's kind of interesting. So let's delve into that chapter a little bit about magic and your experiences from, well, not from start to finish, but maybe the highlights or something, or, something that stands out that either made you change your opinion about something. I don't know. But, yeah, you've been doing it for a while, so let's see.
Well, oh boy, field too large. I'm sorry, Marla. My brain just kind of went a little bit blank there because it was just like, oh, so much I could talk about.
All right.
Here, I will tell a recent story.
Okay.
So, as we've mentioned a couple times now, I now live in Portugal. 2 years ago, I had no idea that I would live in Portugal. I was happily living in the Pacific Northwest outside of Seattle in a job that I'd been in for 16 years. The pandemic had just set in, so the world was shifting and changing, but I had no idea that my life was going to change so much. And my husband and I started having some conversations arising out of the pandemic, sort of along the lines of, tomorrow is promised to no one. So what are we doing with our life? Why are we treading water, basically, to stay here rather than going and living the life we wanted to live when we retire? And, retirement was this big someday. It's a number, and when you're really old or something like that, and
your golden years, yes,
exactly, the golden years, so-called golden years. And what I found myself doing was a lot of thinking about what was important. I think a lot of people were. That was kind of one of the interesting things that happened during lockdown and the pandemic. But we made some decisions that were sort of like, well, if 4 things change, like key elements of our life, if these 4 things change, then we're going to take that as a sign that we should get going and move to Europe. We didn't know it was Portugal then. It was just like, we'll just move to Europe because we wanted to travel here and live a life that's more European-centric than what we have in the United States. And almost immediately after we stated that intention to the universe, just said out loud, these 4 things would have to change. And we had, part of our discussion was, well, this one thing will never happen. So, okay. But these other 3, pretty much boom, 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 over the next 4 months, all 4 of those things happened. Mm-hmm. Just like that. And so I found myself having a very frank conversation with deity, because this is my deal with deity. We have a very frank, clear communication, because if they don't tell me very clearly what I'm supposed to be doing, I will not get the hint. That's kind of our deal. And so I said to deity, I said, okay, you seem to be giving me this really, really strong signal, and this is a huge change in my life. Do I need to make this happen? And that night, I had a dream where I jumped off a cliff. And I woke up and went, okay, all right, got it. Settle it all, thanks. Clear as day. And that was April of 21, and by June of 21, we had figured out what we needed to do to move to Portugal, and we moved in November of 20.
Wow.
And I have to tell you, it was so clear that it was the right thing to do because everything fell into line. Every single thing we needed to do happened exactly on the timeline that it needed to happen in. And it was a very complicated, we had 25 years of house to get rid of.
Oh, wow. To begin with, yeah, that's,
just to start with that, and then, and part of that was what literally are we taking with us into our new life? Like what happens. And so there's a lot of shedding and a lot of purging. And frankly, we're still dealing with it. Almost a year later, we're doing that work. But that was magic from beginning to end. It was not a formal spell. It was not a formal ritual, but it was a conversation with the universe about what needed to happen to get us into a new life, to be better people. And it was the right decision because everything got smooth.
Yeah, and that's kind of amazing because I always think that, talking to deity or the universe, they, for me, maybe because they just want to play with me, it's never 100% clear. There's a hint, and sometimes it's not even a strong hint. And I'm sitting there shaking my head and saying, well, just tell me, speak up, don't make me do this. But then I'm thinking, well, I'm supposed to be learning from this or, something like that.
Yeah, I absolutely think that there have been plenty of lifetimes where I have been exactly where you are and just been like, well, I got a clue. I'll go follow it down. This lifetime, I seem to be able to have when I need to do the thing that they want me to do. There's plenty of times when there's no clear direction and I crave the clear direction and I'm not given it. It's kind of like, okay, well, it doesn't mean a no and it doesn't mean a yes. It just means it's a lot up to me. Fine.
It's just lovely to be an older soul. Really, it is. I mean, I would never want to be the first, when it started because it's bad enough now. But, it's really kind of interesting. Has your magic changed in any way over the time? I mean, do you do a lot of spell work or have you gone into something different? I know you're teaching. That's a big deal. And so has your practicing changed at all?
The last 20 years, my practice has been very oriented around the class that I teach, year-long class. That is shifting the last couple of years. My coven is taking on larger and larger than I used to do. We are in the process of moving from a hierarchical. We're actually almost finished with this, moving from a hierarchical structure, which me at the top, sort of disseminating everything down to layers below me, to a wheel. Actually, not a circle, but a wheel where there is one or more people who are in the pub. Right now, it's mostly me. But then everyone is doing a very specific supporting role of the spokes with the class as the rim of the wheel. And this was an idea that I had 15 years ago of like what I would like to eventually see happen. And it's finally happening, which is also quite magical and quite amazing to participate in. It's really scary in a lot of ways because I'm taking myself out of the central role. And it's been fascinating to see where my ego is tied up in it. So it's really, really good that I'm doing this because this is really deeply necessary. And so my practice is changing because I'm no longer the linchpin of every ritual. I'm no longer the lead for every ritual. I'm no sole teacher. And it's kind of weird having more time.
Yeah.
There are moments where I'm like, because I've been, used to a life where I was a full-time priestess, I was a full-time teacher, and I was a full-time worker and, to bring in actual money.
Yeah.
And now I've retired and I'm moving out of the priestess and teaching roles. So I have more time than I ever had before. A little bit weird.
It'll be nice to get used to it.
Yes. I am enjoying it actually much more than I thought I would. But at the same time, I've spent the last year with most of my belongings locked up in a storage unit. When we moved, we left most everything behind and came with 4 boxes and suitcases. So I haven't had my tools. And I'm in a country where I can get all the candles and incense that I want. but other quote magical implements and tools,
Mm-hmm.
it is not a matter of I can walk into my local metaphysical store and get some ethically sourced crystals.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
So that has produced a profoundly different kind of practice. It's very mental.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very mental. Very, very on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I apparently have things to say about that, so I've been writing about it.
Well, we've got just a couple minutes before the break, but I was going to bring up tools after the break, but I'm just going to bring it up now because we have a couple of minutes. That when you're talking about tools of the craft, I want to mention that particular thing because I've got tools. Everybody else I know has tools. But more than once I've heard that tools are pretty much unnecessary because we ourselves are the most powerful tool that we could ever use. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's absolutely true, but the wonderful thing about tools is they make it easier.
Mm-hmm.
The analogy that I really, really like, one of my coven mates came up with it a couple years ago, is it's like when you're gardening. Yes, you can absolutely dig in the dirt with your own hands and plant the seeds and cup your hands full of water to water your garden. I mean, you can absolutely do all of that and your garden will be okay. Or you could actually use a trowel or a hose and assist yourself getting it done. So I personally think tools are really important for beginners.
Yeah.
Because they just make it so much easier. And when you're training your brain to do magic and to have a connection with spirit, however that looks, then giving yourself something that makes it easier, I just think that's great. And then aim for a place where you don't necessarily have to use tools.
Yeah,
Get to a point where you can practice both and see which works better.
Well, I think a combination is really good. But, I mean, I was floored when, as a teenager again, I bought a wand and I was so happy with my wand. And then somebody said, you're only doing that to focus your energy. It's not going to shoot sparkles out or anything like that, It's just, it's a tool to keep you concentrating on what you're doing. And I could feel my bottom lip kind of go down for a minute. Yeah. Yeah. But then it makes sense that if it helps you for the focus, it's being a tool for usage also. I mean, it's not just, for games and whatever. I mean, there's so many things that we learn over the years, and then when we get seasoned, and I'm not going to say old, it all starts making sense. And then you look back and you're kind of scratching your head, and it's like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Why did I have that idea? But then again, when you're starting out, you're looking at different things. You're reading different books. You're listening to different people. And it gets kind of confusing. And maybe somebody that you kind of believe in is not giving you accurate information. So it's a learning process from A to Z, But it's fun. I like it.
It is. It really, really is. And the tools are fun. They are fun. They're shiny. And they're affirming.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. And the first time you buy your own, athame or in your case a wand, there's a shift that happens. You're taking yourself seriously.
Exactly.
And I think that's important.
Yes, it is. All right. Well, we're going to have to take a quick important break right now. So when we come back, we're going to be talking about the second part of the book, which is practice. So everybody stay put. And we'll be right back.
Cauldron will be right back, so don't go away. If you end up with webbed feet, remember, you've been warned.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Juarez with Cat Paranormal of Minnesota.
And I'm Jerry Ayers with Supernatural Investigators of Minnesota. And together, we are The Calling. Every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, only on ParaXRadioNetwork.com.
For a truly unique podcast experience, we have you covered. Spirit Bayou with CJ Dunham airs live from the Third Coast in Southeast Texas on Tuesday and Fridays at midnight Eastern Time, covering Creole folklore and folk magic to strange paranormal activity to new equipment for the field. CJ Dunham is a Catholic swamp witch, a devotee to our Mother Mary and the Trinity, a true believer in our Lord, the Holy Ghost, and Christ. Peace be with your spirit and the spirits by you.
Hey everyone, it's Marla. If you like tonight's episode of Stirring the Cauldron and the archive podcast as well, take a look at the show's YouTube channel and check out the dozens of shows that are there just waiting to be heard. New shows are added each week, and while you're there, why not subscribe? It's free. And if you click on that tiny little bell icon at the top of the page, you'll be notified when new shows are available. Just go to youtube.com and then type in Stirring the Cauldron ParaX and the link will appear. Just like magic.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
And my guest tonight is Lisa McSherry, and we're talking about her new book, A Witch's Guide to Crafting Your Practice. And there was something I wanted to ask, came through, and during the break, somebody sent me a note. They were wondering about witch names. Some people keep their own names, some people don't. So what do you think? I mean, is it something that all witches should kind of think about? And change, have a witchy name as in addition to the real name, or is it necessary? I mean, give us the 911 on that one. Wait, 411.
The 411.
Yeah.
Or the 911. I mean, it may be a spiritual emergency.
Yes, it could be.
I happen to think that, first of all, having a new name, a craft name, a witch name, is not necessary. It's not. It's not required. No one's going to look you up and cite you if you don't take a new name. However, I think that the process of choosing a new name can be phenomenally empowering, and it can be an expression of who we want to be eventually, even if we aren't quite there yet. Or it can be an expression of who we are right now. I have known plenty of people who change their craft name almost every year. It's a little tricky to keep up with sometimes. It's like, oh, you used to be Autumn and now you're Amber. Okay, you can do that. But, then the third time through, you're like, and now you're Grey Wolf. Okay. Most people settle after like a couple of names. But, all of those names are really important to the person who chose them. And they can walk through their ordinary life, their mundane life, and be like, yeah, okay, I'm Lisa. Yeah, I'm Lisa. That's fine. But, when I step into the ritual circle, I'm Mott. And that's a different person.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different personality. That is a different way of being in the world. And I'm very conscious of the fact that those are two different ways of me dealing with how things are going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa is organized and structured and plans everything and is very responsible. And Mott is also very responsible, but much more looking for a magical solution to things or a spiritual solution to things rather than being structured and organized.
And logical.
Logical and all that, I mean, when I first was actually working in a group, because if you have a craft name and you're just by yourself, then it doesn't really go beyond your head what your craft name is. But when I first started working in a group, I just was Lisa for decades, really. I like my name, and I saw no reason to choose a new one. When I started getting formal training about 20 years ago, like in a group that was literally specifically structured to fill in all the gaps in your information and all things being equal, get initiated kind of a thing. My high priestess at the time was very, very, you've got to have a craft name. You've got to have a different name. Really, really serious about it. And so I said, fine, my craft name is Lisa Dawn. And my middle name is Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of cheated a little bit, but that's as far as I wanted to go. I had no call for anything else.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I cycled through my formal training and was ready to start my own coven, I had come upon a craft name, which is where Mott came into. That's part of but that's the only part I use in public. And part of it was because I wanted to evoke the qualities of the Egyptian goddess, Ma'at. But I don't spell it with the apostrophe because I don't feel I'm not deity.
Mm-hmm.
So while I am pulling her characteristics into myself and I'm drawing on them because I thought they would be very good for a leader, I do not think I am her. Which confuses some people because they're like, "Oh yeah, you must be really into Egyptian." I'm like, "No, really, I'm not. She's actually not my deity, but I'm borrowing the information." And in fact, my full name actually evokes several qualities that I wanted to create as a new leader in priesthood for other people, and so it's very deliberately and very consciously chosen. And the only time anyone hears the full name is in very specific, very private ritual.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's, some people just do it because they think it's cute, but then those are people that really aren't knowledgeable enough, really, to want to be a witch and learn about it. Maybe it's just a label on a forehead. And then that label's even better because it's, look at me, I've got an interesting name, So
well, yes, but there's also, there's lots of people who explore different spiritualities along the path, and every single student I've had over the years is not in my life. Plenty of people I've taught who got what they needed and have moved on to do their own thing and their own practices, and that's exactly the point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, good. And I feel very comfortable that if they ever wanted to work with a group, they know what that should look like. They know what it should feel like. Excuse me. And so, them changing their name along the way, it's just fine.
Yeah.
There's a text that roams around written by a lady pixie Moondrip.
Oh.
And the name it was very deliberately, consciously chosen to be a silly name.
Mm-hmm.
Lady Pixie Moondrip.
That's cute, though.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with it.
No, there isn't. All right, so I want to get a little bit deeper into part 2 of the book, and I want to begin with the first chapter there because it's called "It's All in Your Mind," and you say that it's the first lesson on the most critical skill a witch can develop. You want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, if you can't see before you get started with your magic, if you can't see the outcome, you will not succeed.
Right.
And that's totally foundational, and it's hard. It's really, really hard because we have a lot of distractions in our life. It is hard to find the time to be quiet in our heads. It's really hard to train our brain to see something that doesn't yet exist, and to feel the emotional connection that it does exist, just haven't seen it yet. And that's what magic is. Just knowing that a thing that you don't see or isn't tangible yet will be tangible, is tangible. Making that connection right then and there, that's hard.
Yeah, it is.
You know, and it just and it's hard to write about because it's so very experiential. It's so, you gotta do this. This is where you go from thinking about what your spiritual practice looks like and feels like to doing spiritual practice. You gotta show up. Gotta show up. You've gotta practice it.
Yeah. It's all good in theory, but yeah, practice makes perfect. Yeah, that's, people sometimes are in a big hurry, and you know, they overlook those things.
And it's a place where beginners in particular, you know, don't get a lot of direction to know that they're doing it right. And that was really important for me to say, you know, because there are plenty of people, for example, who actually don't, when they quote visualize, they don't see. You know, it's not a picture in their head. And so I've had plenty of students over the years who've been like, I don't see the apple. Doing an exercise where you bite an apple, basically. And they're like, I don't see that. And it's like, okay, go with the words. Because, you know what an apple is, right? Yeah. Okay. Go with that in your head. Is it a smell? Can you smell apple? Taste apple? You know, whatever your brain does to process information, figure that thing out and go forward. And, you know, that still works. That's still magic. That still makes it happen. But a lot of people really focus on, well, you've got to see it.
Well, that's because people tell them what to do, and that's exactly what we don't do generally. You know, that's why there isn't one book for all witches, because we're all different. And you know, well, I was taught a long time ago in casting a spell, while you cast it, you have to see it come to fruition. Not just cast it and hope that it's going to happen, but you have to visualize the outcome while you're doing it. Otherwise,
and that's the difference between a prayer and a spell. Prayer is you're hoping your wish gets granted.
Right.
And a spell is you know it's going to.
Yeah. You just kind of put your big girl or big boy pants on and just know it's going to happen. But I think people have trouble believing in themselves. I mean, they're going to do it. They're going to try their best, but there's that little thing that's niggling in their brain that, oh, well, it might not work. You know, you're not maybe good enough to have it work. It's all about getting our senses together and understanding that we can do whatever we put our mind out to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me see, where am I here? Oh, okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about energy work. I'm going to be bumping around real quick in the last few minutes. And what caught my eye in that chapter was you talk about grounding and rooting. Now, I always thought, or was taught again, or learning all the way, that grounding entailed walking barefoot on the earth, and that would help pull the energy out of the soil and ground you. But rooting is more like grounding, where you see yourself planting yourself. So is there a major difference between the two? Obviously there must be.
Well, there's not a major difference. Grounding is, I've actually have never been taught, although I have heard recently about this practice of walking on the earth. Grounding. Yeah. For me, it was just stand still and feel your connection to the earth. And and rooting was the next level of getting down into and being like a tree, literally bush, kind of going out. And I think it's a shift in how you feel, and I mean, as you point out, grounding can be a movement thing. Ideally, it's barefoot. Most of us who live in a city aren't really going to go for a walk in our bare feet.
No.
So, I think grounding could still work if you had shoes on. Work a little harder at it to make that connection. But the thing about rooting is, you could sit and just feel burrowing down into the earth, and it's a different kind of energy. It's a reaching for an energy as opposed to pulling up. Might be sort of the biggest difference between the two of them. And rooting is sort of a fundamental part of connecting, doing a meditation, which is tree sky connection. Sort of root down into the earth, and then from your crown, top of your head, you reach up into the sky and connect with that energy. Conduit between the two, and the first time you do that, it's like wow, it's like a lightning going through your veins, and because it just can be really, really intense, but it feels so good, and connects us to those major energies.
Somebody I was speaking with earlier today is a beginner and wanted to do some kind of work with energy. And so he said he was trying to send some energy to someone else that needed it. And he thinks he did it, but he wasn't exactly sure. But he felt something in his body, in his mind, that let him know that it was working. And so for a beginner, what do you have advice in getting proficient in working with energy in general?
I really like starting with the energy work within yourself as the way to start sensing it. And my favorite exercise is what I call a ball, light ball of warmth. People sense energy kind of differently, but it's so simple. And so for everyone listening in, take your hands, rub them very briskly back and forth, kind of together. Your palms will probably feel kind of warm, the friction. And then just when you feel that warmth, just start pulling your hands apart very slowly until you don't feel any warmth or energy or sensation. And then push it back together again. And you will begin to feel the energy between your hands. And it will feel thicker or denser, warmer, tingly, and then you can start playing with that energy. It's a very literal thing. You can breathe into that energy. You can pull that energy into yourself. Start playing with it, because then you're sensing it, and then you're starting to manipulate it. And then when you try to send it to somebody else, you know what it is that you're sending.
And I'm sitting here. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm just giggling because I told him to check on my blog on my website because it was all about making an energy ball.
Oh, see, it's great. It's such a simple, wonderful technique, and almost everybody immediately feels something. So it's a really I like exercises that have a very quick positive reinforcement, because then you feel like you can go to the next one or do it more. It worked right off the bat, and that the ball of energy is really, or friction hand sensing is works for almost.
Yeah, you just validated me, so thank you very much. It was funny though. That's why I had to break in and be rude. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, hang on. Well, I want to mention that in the practice part of the book, there are activities for everything. And so, I mean, you're not just reading, and you're going to have to start doing. So you have to really be into it to do it. And I think I kind of mentioned this earlier, that there's so much in there, in it's not a small book, but I mean, everything is succinctly put in, as we were talking about, and you haven't missed a beat on anything, but it was one thing after the other. I mean, there's, in that part of the book, it's, you're talking about creating spells and rituals, and as we said, tools of the craft, creating sacred space, which is important, inviting powers and beings, calling to the deities. I mean, there's just about everything that everybody needs to know. And you nailed it, because I'm thinking, oh, wow, creating sacred space, that's important, and then it was just something that I think everybody needs to have this book that wants to either get a refresher course or just are learning, because everything is pretty much in there, and it's not written like a textbook like some people write. It's really easy to read and go through, and and so thank you for doing that.
No, thank you for the compliment. I'm glad I hit the target.
No, you did. Because I'm thinking, because sometimes people write and they write kind of that, not that it's above anybody's head, but it's more technical. And this isn't a technical subject. It's a very serious subject, but it needs you don't need to scare people away. It's like the difference between a tarot deck and an oracle deck. If you really want to get into reading cards, tarot is it. But that it takes a lot of study. 72 cards or whatever, and front and back, upside down. It's different. You take an oracle deck and you look at the picture and you know what it says. So I guess it's kind of how deeply you want to delve into something or not. But there's just about something for anybody that has any questions. They're probably going to be answered in the book before they have the questions to ask. Maybe that's a good way of saying it.
That's great. That was what I was aiming for. It was kind of funny because my other two books are much more advanced and sort of bigger topics in a lot of ways. So going back to the basics and being able to speak to people who come to be interested in doing something. And I happen to think it's really important that I don't happen to think that I have the only path to being a better person, or to a spiritual practice. I mean, there's thousands of ways to get there, literally, and everyone actually has their own way of doing it, by and large, if they're within a specific tradition.
Mm-hmm. But I think
all valid.
They are, and all like I said, they're actions and practices and just everything that you need to know, and maybe for later, you might not need to know it now, but it's proactive. You're not just reading a book. You're hands-on. You're doing things. You're learning things and growing as you do it. So yeah, that's important. But okay, so time not being on our side, we're going to kind of run down now, but please give us the website address and what kind of things that people can find on the website. And I also really liked a brief description of the priestessing page.
Yeah. So my website I can always be found through lisamcsherry.com. Literally, there's a contact page there. There's a page for all the appearances that I'm doing. Podcasts, for example, when I get a link after their broadcast, I update there, so you can listen to my dulcet tones as many times as you would like. And my website has links to my other books, all my other projects, including jaguarmoon.org, which is a coven in my class that I teach, and then facingnorth.net, which is a community resource. Specifically, it's a review site for mostly books, but also tarot decks and divination sets and such like that. Things of interest to the alternative spirituality, not just witchcraft. I actually work with a circle of, at the moment, 7 other people. We all do reviews, and so it's not just one voice. We do about 10 reviews a month. We're actually quite prolific. Talk about what we think. And so there's links to those. My priestessing page is because I am actually a priestess, and I see a lot of what I do as a service to the larger community in various ways. I love creating ritual with people, created marriages in various ways, and maybe, well, the phrase would be a christening, but wouldn't use that. A baby blessing, that's the way to put it, to mark a baby's entry into the world instead of church and things like that. I love creating unique rituals. And it's a little bit more difficult now that I'm no longer in the United States, but things can be worked out in very.
Yes, you could stay up in the middle of the night again.
Or different times a day.
There you go.
But there's also workshops that I love to teach and am happy to be invited. I've done a lot of group dynamic work. So being brought to a group to talk about how they can function better, recognizing the life cycle of magical groups, things like that. I enjoy sharing my knowledge with other people. Things.
And you've got a lot of knowledge to send and share. and easy stuff. Yeah. I mean, yeah. This is really good.
Putting things in my head, and I just keep having to share them with the world. So.
Well, that's important. That's your path. You're sharing and teaching and whatever. What are the other 2 books, real quick? What are the titles that you have?
Magical Connections, which is literally the group dynamics of magical groups, both in terms of life cycle, dealing with conflict resolution, continuity, keeping things going. There's a number of years ago, I read a statistic that said that most magical groups, i.e. covens for the most part, don't last longer than 3 years.
Mm.
And that seems to be very true in a lot of ways. So I wrote a book.
Good.
Ideas that you might be able to go get past that 3-year mark and into a longer. And I can point to the fact that my own group has been going for 20 plus years.
There you go.
I'm doing something right. And then
Yes,
my other book is actually Virtual Pagan 2.0, which is literally talking about virtual magic, techno-pagans, and doing magic and ritual and teaching magic online.
Oh, great. All right. Well, maybe you can come back and talk about one of those books down the line.
I'd love to.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing this book. And I want to thank everybody who's listening in, too. And we're out of here. So until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2009.
You have been listening to the Para X Radio Network.